You know, I'm sick of hearing the same old bullshit that I hear every time I dare cover the excessiveness of video game industry excess. Well, I'm going to start doing a few episodes addressing the common bullshit that pops up, like we're doing today. Do enjoy the episode. I had a lot of fun making it, because very much like our last episode on YouTube, it's been a long time coming. Enjoy! The Jimquisition covers a lot of quote-unquote unpopular business decisions, from excessive downloadable content to exploitative gambling mechanics, to the dozen other underhanded money-making schemes employed by major publishers. Time and time again, these practices are defended by a gaggle of corporate mouthpieces and executive arse-kissers with a small handful of pre-packaged excuses, as plastic and generic as the products they're desperately sticking up for. Perhaps the most popular excuse is that games never rose with inflation, despite their increasing production costs. For all their slimeball behaviour, we're meant to be grovellingly grateful to our magnanimous corporate overlords for not raising the price of games beyond $60. And of course there is a truth in that. It is true that games have remained $60 for a long time, their MSRP remaining in stasis while the costs of goods and video game development, yes, have risen. At face value, it's a difficult justification to unjustify, but let's not kid ourselves. Let's, as our detractors would say, get real and stop being so idealistic. Yes, the basic price of games has remained the same, but you're friggin' kidding yourself if you think $60 has remained the true cost of a full video game. Let's start with the most obvious point, the good old season pass. Originally a way to make extra money quickly by duping the public into pre-ordering downloadable content, DLC that often hadn't been conceived of yet, let alone made, the season pass has quickly this generation evolved into its more common form, that form being the rest of the bloody game. This was most vitally seen in Star Wars Battlefront, which released as a shell of itself, an early triple access title, and required a $50 season pass to complete. After a year of drip-fed content deployment, Battlefront finally resembled something like a complete product, but the real cost of said product was far from $60. More realistically, it was $110. If you wanted everything Battlefront had to offer, the full experience, it was over $100, not the $60 shell price. Battlefront is far from the only game to start including vital story mission and gear content as part of its season pass. Watch Dogs 2, despite being an excellent game in its own right, is riddled with so much DLC and season pass content, it's a mind-boggling task to keep track of. And Nintendo, of course, has merrily embraced the system, putting extra mission content and even difficulty modes behind these additional paywalls that inevitably tack at least another $20 onto the base price. Because that's what $60 is now. It's not the price of a game. It's the base price of a game, the shell price. The starting point. You can buy the skeletal package of the game that way, but it's clear where the full experiences lie. The growth of DLC to the point of requiring their own separate pre-orders via season passes has long made a myth of the $60 price point as far as I'm concerned. The fact that $60 is a mere shell price, an hors d'oeuvre tier price point, is hammered home by a casual stroll through any digital storefront these days. If you look at the listings of AAA games today, you'll note with increasing regularity how many of them have 2, sometimes even 3 listings. The basic $60 game, and then either some deluxe edition or both a deluxe edition and a super duper special deluxe edition. Major publishers, always seeming to be subtly in cahoots on these things, have started to codify and simplify this process by naming the more expensive options silver and gold editions. This is an especial favourite of the sleazeballs at 2K Games, whose recent microtransaction-laden glorified gambling simulator NBA 2K18 featured a basic $60 game, a Legend Edition for $99.99, and a Legend Edition Gold for an unbelievable $150. I know I called NBA 2K18 a gambling simulator there. It's not actually a gambling simulator, it's well, more like a simulation of a shitty mobile free-to-play game. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. Similarly, Destiny 2 offered the so-called Standard Edition at base price, a Season Pass bundle, aka the full game, for $89.99, and the Digital Deluxe Edition at $99.99. And then we get to Shadow of War, the gold standard for the Gold Edition explosion. Base game $59.99, Silver Edition $79.99, Gold Edition $99.99. The Silver and Gold Editions contain not insignificant content upgrades, especially Shadow of War, which has hidden 2 major enemy tribes and extensive story missions behind these paywalls. The message to the customer is simple and clear: $59.99 gets you access, but $100 or so gets you the experience. And you know, I'd almost be completely fine with that. It actually is a way to offset those costs by introducing pricing tiers that you know plenty of fans are gonna go head over heels for. The fact this Gold Edition trend has slipped by largely unnoticed shows that it was a working formula that people weren't too pissed off about. But it's worth noting that all 3 of those games I just mentioned also indulged in microtransaction-fueled loot boxes as well, adding a manipulative perpetual money-making system with no upper limit to their games at the same time. So they'd already found a way to make games cost more than $60, and in a manner customers would even find relatively acceptable. Oh, but they just couldn't stop there. They never just stop. And that's always been my problem. Not the fact companies need to make money, but that when they make the money, they just can't keep their dicks in their fucking pants. It stops becoming about need at some point and starts becoming about greed, no matter how many apologists claim otherwise. Let us not forget either that just because the price of games never rose, that doesn't mean publishers have ever had to tighten their belt straps particularly tight. You don't see Strauss Zelnick wearing tissue boxes for shoes, and that's because despite the static price point, the overall value of games has notably dropped over the years. I'm sorry, but I'm done hearing people who claim that content hasn't been cut from video games over time. It's a bullshit excuse that hinges on using the exact words in order to have a ring of truth to it. While it may not be explicitly true, not that we've proof, that single games are fully made first then retroactively carved up to sell to us piecemeal, it's hardly a secret that games on the whole have historically redacted content that used to be part of a basic experience. It may seem as if costumes and different gameplay modes have always been separate DLC packages, but some of us are just old enough to remember when that crap came as standard. Costumes, cheat codes, additional game types, these were all part of a full game once, as were varied missions, and open world games that weren't just repetitive, grindy, busywork tasks recycled over and over a fucking again. But a lot of these things that used to be part of the basic experience became cordoned off to be included as part of a season pass or additional DLC pack that are either sold at launch or breadcrumbed out over the course of a year. The process was slow and subtle, but it happened. We're not imagining it, it happened. We look at Bethesda's notorious Horse Armor DLC for Oblivion as a joke, a meme, but it's not really very funny. It was the harbinger of things to come. What once seemed silly has, when you look around you, become fairly normal. Despite its status as a continued meme, Horse Armor ain't shit these days. On a more immediately comprehensible level, we can look at how individual game series have cut content between releases. Most recently, Forza 7 changed the way race modifications work. Once a standard part of the game, players could make races more or less challenging to earn virtual currency. Now this feature has been turned into so-called mods that are hidden away in, you guessed it, loot boxes. Sorry, prize crates, turning Forza into what Ars Technica smartly called a pay-to-earn game. Similarly, Destiny 2 caused a major fan outcry when shaders, cosmetic items that customise your gear's colour and texture, went from permanent unlockables in Destiny to one-shot consumables in the sequel, once again locked behind loot boxes, this time called bright engrams, and randomly uncovered in batches of 3. That's one number less than the number you need to fully colorise all your character's gear, of course. Both Forza 7 and Destiny 2 had content in predecessors that were held to ransom in their sequels, and once again this is on top of the season passes and multiple editions that should have already offset the mythical $60 price point. While we're talking about additional ways to make money, the game industry may not have risen its basic prices, but it's also gone decades without paying the royalties paid in other industries. Rihanna Pratchett just recently reminded us that writers don't get royalties, and Michael Hollick caused a stir years ago when he revealed he received nothing but his basic payment for voicing Nico Bellic in GTA 4, even as it went on to make mountains upon mountains of cash for Take-Two. Unsurprisingly, the developers doing the hardest of the hard work get nothing extra for their efforts either, often instead rewarded with mass layoffs after completing a game, or seeing any potential financial bonuses tied to Metacritic of all the stupid goddamn things. I need to stress this is unusual for entertainment industries, okay? The video game business successfully weaseled out of paying its dues, and these anomalous savings get to go to tax havens where, as Super Bunny Hop explained, these poor set-upon publishers pleading poverty and telling us games are just so expensive are hoarding their profits and failing to contribute to an economy they'll gladly suck money out of all the livelong day. And all that cash joins the money they're already making through extravagant physical collector's editions, fast food and energy drink sponsorship. Hell, WWE 2K18 is using food product logos for achievements and trophy symbols, selling you KFC and Snickers as rewards for accomplishing things in-game. So again, the basic price of a game might not have moved from $60, but the idea publishers haven't already found buckets of ways to make additional scratch off their products. Products which have more and more become cookie-cutter open worlds full of repetitive, grindy content that feel increasingly devalued, is naive at best, insidiously grovelly at worst. This all especially stinks when you recall it's always the biggest franchises, the most successful games, the guaranteed moneymakers that go all in on every slimy scheme. Not just one or two schemes, of course, but everything! It's now not uncommon for a single game to boast a physical collector set, a three-pronged standard silver and gold edition launch, a season pass, DLC outside the season pass, microtransactions, and food sponsorships, all while refusing to pay royalties and while dodging taxes, and they say I'm the fucking unreasonable one. So no, the cost of video games never rose above $60. But if you think $60 is what games actually cost these days, you tit. You know, almost as if to drive my point home, I was watching Hell in a Cell last night and they announced that Colonel fucking Sanders is now a playable character. Keep making that cheddar, 2K. But while we're talking about bullshit, let's remind you of something I've said before. We never asked for games to be this expensive. That's that other justification. Games are too expensive. They have to have every single slimy money-making scheme in the world. Right, I never asked for Metal Gear Solid 5 to have a horse that shits itself in real time. I never asked for the Tomb Raider reboot to have individually animated hair strands. And given that some of the most popular games in the world are games like Minecraft, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, it seems that a lot of the world doesn't really ask for things like, I don't know, Square Enix inventing a brand new engine for every single game it announces 5 years before the game comes out. The video game industry pushing graphics, lying about graphics like they did with Watch Dogs, pushing visuals constantly, they're the ones that did this. They made the rod for their own back and expect us to pick up the tab. So not even that excuse flies with me that games are so expensive, because they're the ones who made that decision. So fuck them, thank God for me, and something else. Other things. Harumph.